So guys, when we look at overall market numbers here, right? A lot of people here in the call think, well, what are some relevant reasons for us to actually set up a training team? Now, when we think about this, we first need to look at what typical challenges there are for companies in order to hire employees. First part is that essentially your year over year salary increase is 10%, right? Now, when we know this, it also means that our costs for hiring people increases every time, which is a challenge for many companies. Secondly, many employees at this point quit their job, right? So there's a turnover challenge that people have within, especially the Vietnamese, but also overall Asian market, where a large amount of people tend to quit their job on an annual basis. In addition to that, companies also face employees who have people in a job who are actually not satisfied. And these unsatisfied and therefore unproductive employees cost companies actually a lot of money on an annual basis, right? If you look at estimated costs in the United States, we lose about 560 billion US dollars every year in the US alone for unproductive employees. Now, this is important because we need to turn that around, and it's our job as company HR people to ensure that our employees are able to actually run their job effectively. Now, when we look then a little bit closer at what our workforce looks like these days, a lot of people, especially now in Vietnam, are from Generation Z. And why is that in Vietnam? Because relatively speaking, many people in Vietnam are quite young. 1/3 of the Vietnamese population is below 25 years old, which means that we increasingly are dealing with people who are quite young, quite unexperienced, and therefore have sometimes a bit of a different mindset than more experienced people who have already joined this company for a while, right? And this sets itself up in a couple of statistics that we see here. So first of all, one of the reasons to take a new job for people is that 44% of people actually want to learn new skills, right? Acquire new knowledge, or they actually want to earn more salary, right? That's typical. Those are typical reasons to actually learn a new job. And you think, hey, learning new skills and acquiring new knowledge, what's the difference? Well, basically learning new skills means that you are actually in a different job. And in that new job, you actually learn new skills, right? Acquire new knowledge is the part where you actually train or get trained in order to be able to do other things, right? So there's a difference. Salary, of course, is an influencer, but not as large as you might actually think. It's 80%, right? Now then, going to the second column, what are some reasons to stay in the job, right? First of all, if you provide good income and benefits, that actually creates already a good platform for your employees to stay and keep doing what you are doing. Yeah. Now, when companies actually provide the possibility to develop themselves and to basically become more solid professionals, that's also a good reason to stay in the job. And for a lot of people also, climbing the corporate ladder is actually quite important, right? Because it allows for more knowledge, more more possibility to build your career. And when you like the company that you're in, this is definitely something that employees will link to. Then there's a flip side, right? Because these days, and this is something that is quite underlit and not very often discussed in Vietnam, but overall in Asia and overall in the job market, which is the reasons why people burn out, right? And people burn out for many types of reasons, but one of the main ones is actually that there's no room for development. If you are stuck in a certain position and you feel that nothing is moving, that frustrates people, and that frustration and stress builds up to the point that people actually stress out and leave, right? Another part, 37% is actually an overwhelming or unrealistic workload. This happens a lot too, right? Where people are so much put under stress that they are just failing. And the other part is also where people themselves are telling them like, I'm not doing it right, and therefore I'm stressing out, or I'm not doing it in the way that I thought that I should be doing it, or I'm going too slow in the corporate ladder, and all these kind of things, right? So all these kind of things add into people stressing out and through that burning out. So these are issues, right, that we as companies basically need to deal with. And it's harsh to say this, right? It sucks to be us, but we as companies have a responsibility to make sure that our employees actually thrive, right? Because that allows us to actually grow them, but also to ensure that they stay. And that has its own set of benefits, as I will show you in a second, right? Now, when we look at overall training, right, then we see one very clear statistic, which is this. When you train people, you have 24% higher profit margins. It's as simple as that, right? And this actually has quite a few benefits, right? So if we completely connect it to how much do we earn as a company, then training has a direct impact on us creating higher profit margins, right? Now, the benefit here that they have calculated comes from retention, right? If we think about how much it costs to replace someone, then on average, it costs us over 21% of an annual salary of an employee to actually replace that particular person inside our own company, right? So if somebody makes $40,000 a year, that costs us over $8,500 to just replace that person. So that means that we need to ensure that we keep people as much as we can, right? So then training can come as a certain cost to that. The other part is where we just keep people happy, right? And Richard Branson has a great way to highlight this. And he says, well, if you take care of your employees, they will take care of your business. And various types of research have shown that there's a direct connection there as well, right? So it helps for us to train our people on a continuous level and showcase that we actually care for them, but also through that they will do more things for us as companies. Now, some more things closer to home, right? When we look at large companies within Vietnam, right, we already see big size companies, 1,000 employees and up, yeah, that actually take a large part of revenue, right? So this is in billions of dollars, right? So we have a large amount of big size companies, over 17,000 now. We have hundreds of thousands of medium-sized companies, right, between 100 and 1,000 employees. And we have also a whole bunch of smaller companies that are below 50 employees, right? The SMEs, as we call them. And as you can see, they already bring in quite a bit of revenue. But if you calculate and connect this revenue that I've just shown to the amount of revenue that training can actually generate for these types of companies, you actually see that if you accrue these things, if you connect them and build them together, you see that there's a loads of potential just for training itself in companies just where we look at revenue, right? So there is a clear monetary benefit to train people in our company. Now, here's another statistic that's a bit scary, right? Because if we look to the overall job market in Southeast Asia and we look at people's productivity, then you can see that Vietnam's labor power is fairly low in relation to many countries in Southeast Asia, right? 83 out of 141 countries, with Singapore highest in Southeast Asia and Vietnam the lowest. So we can ask ourselves why that is, right? And there's too much there to go into at this point, but it showcases basically that there's a trend where essentially productivity is to that extent low that we have a lot of positive grounds to gain, right? So instead of looking at, oh boy, this is bad, we can also look at how far we can actually rise, right? And that is where we as trainers, but also we as HR professionals can actually shine, because this is our part to actually drag this up, right? And if you ask me personally why I came to Vietnam, this is one of the main reasons, right? To do that here and to help people like to build that kind of not just productivity, but just overall happiness for people being here and doing their job and actually enjoying what it is that they are doing. So, lastly, many of these large companies that I just showed have a problem with actual retention of knowledge. So by that, I mean that lots of the knowledge that companies have is actually inside the heads of experienced employees that are part of that company's overall group of employees, right? So for example, if you have this technical engineer who has been at the same company for 7 years, this person has built up a lot of knowledge in their head. But in many companies, this knowledge just stays in this person's head and actually never goes into, for example, a central repository where all employees can actually enjoy that knowledge. In many cases, there is no mentoring or schooling program where internally employees are schooled and highlighted on how to do stuff and how to actually showcase what makes your company great. And this is a problem because when these people leave, there's basically not just a gap in productivity, but also a very clear gap in knowledge. And building a training team is also one of these main reasons why you actually keep that knowledge in-house and you ensure that nothing gets lost in case that an experienced person or even less experienced person leaves. Yeah? So these are some of the outliers, right? These are some of the overall reasonings that we have to actually build training teams, but also an overall corporate training strategy. So if I would basically summarize this, right, we can see that here. So essentially, yeah, we can see here that, you know, if we ensure knowledge retention, yeah, that is one way you do by building a training team, right? Ensuring enhanced productivity, right? Ensuring things like a customized training program, yeah, that allows all employees to actually do what it is they would like to do. Ensuring a detailed business partner for support, right? Because what you want as a company is that you understand, right, who can support you in all these training efforts. Ensure employee retention. We've kind of made that point, but it's an important one, right? Ensuring a learning culture in your company, a culture where people can make mistakes, a culture where people can learn from each other, right? And through that, of course, ensure improved productivity, right? That all brings these things together. All right. So sorry, guys, my mouse cursor got lost a little bit. So I just, I just need to clear that for a bit. So let me go into a little bit of detail and show you what it's actually like to start a training business for yourself, right? So let's say that you are in a company and you basically say, look, I would like that there is a training organization or training team within my own company, right? And you decide to start one of those things. Now, I'll go into a few more details later where it comes to cost structure and such. But essentially, what you want to do first is to set up your own strategy. Understand, first of all, what it is that your team, your training team will deliver to the overall business, right? And then start to visualize, okay, if I know what to deliver, then visualize what the support structure for your training team looks like. How are we going to train people? How are we going to measure results, right? Then you create a team setup and define the headcounts and the JDs or the job descriptions, right? So basically, you need to look at overall what the team needs to look like. You need to look at the budget available and you need to say, okay, who can I hire for this? And what are the prime priorities that these people in the team need to take in order to build your learning strategy and also your learning deliverables? And then lastly, set your team priorities, right? You can have like a zillion goals, but the trick is, what do we start with first, right? What is first important to set up? That's when you build your training team. So essentially, when you look at your training team overall, right, what you want to do is think about, like I said, what some of those achievements, right? And when I was working in the Netherlands, the first time I set up a training team was back in 2010, when I still worked for Bosch and Siemens. I worked there for about 1 year. And after about 6 months there, they asked me, okay, can you set up a training team? Or actually, I suggested that. And the reason why is because I saw a lot of lost potential by two trainers, myself and the other trainer, to work beside each other or alongside each other. And I decided, okay, this doesn't work. We are working in a bad way. Let's set up a team that allows centralized knowledge, right? And what I did is I wanted to first make sure that we created, or that we wanted to set some achievements, right? What is our team going to deliver? So the first one is to provide the best training for our partners. That was the main setup. And to support the sales team with trainings related to the unique selling points that both the sales and the marketing team had, right? So that's the overall setup, right? That's the overall strategy. Now, this kind of training and the setup of your team can have different kind of basis, right? You can say, look, we need to have like a centralized learning repository, or we need to have a standard onboarding training program that allows people to understand what it is that we really do, right? It could be any of these things. But in this case, what I did is to help and support the sales and marketing teams. Now then you start to think, okay, so what do I need to deliver in order to make this happen? Well, in my case, that was quality training materials that are easy to understand, right? And also training feedback with a score of 80% or higher, right? I wanted to make this as quantitative as possible. And the reason why is that then I could actually measure impact, measure results. Yeah. Lastly, I needed to figure out, okay, so what team do I need in order to get this done, right? First of all, I needed people to build content. Yeah, I wanted people to understand the content of our products really well and build this in a way that makes sense to the people who sell it for us, right? And lastly, I wanted to have trainers who are passionate about helping people to sell. Because as I was helping and training the sales team and also the marketing team, I wanted to have people who are convinced and emotionally strong about, you know, what products we are selling. Right? So those are the things to focus on. And if we look at the overall way that I set this up, this is a big figure, right? So I'll talk you guys through it step by step. But basically, I started with both the sales team and the marketing team. So here on our left and right hand side, the green box and the yellow box. And what I wanted there was to say, okay, I want to be a good business partner for the sales and marketing team. So I went to them and I said, what is it that you need in order to showcase that training is successful, or that your team is actually going to be successful? And they said, very simple, we want more sales and we want better branding, right? More branding results. All right, fine. I will go ahead then and build that by creating training content that reflects exactly who we are as a company. And through that, encourages people to sell more, but also to know more about the company itself. So that's the first part. Then I built training content, and by actually looking at that, I would already get feedback from the people in the teams about what that training content looked like and also how well it fit. Then the other part, of course, was increased branding and sales results. It's a no-brainer, but that is something you need to include because that's something that I could directly go to the sales and marketing teams with. So based upon that, I built content. I hired an extra trainer who was great at what he was doing. And we created constant trainer learning, right? So as I had been training trainers in the past at Google, I knew how to actually train trainers. So the people who came on board, I gave them extra classes, extra schooling, extra focus on like how to increase and build their training performance, right? So then we, through that, could deliver first-class trainings, right? And I would actually get evaluated based upon how much the sales results were, but also how people would actually rate the trainings that my team was delivering, right? So that created feedback all the way at the top, and this could be fed back towards sales results, and through that then I would rebuild and relaunch the training content so I could implement whatever feedback came my way to ensure that I would become the best trusted business partner for the sales and marketing teams, right? And that's basically a pretty simple model, but that's the essence of how things work, right? You understand your support role, You understand what deliverables are focused on that, and then you start to prioritize where you need to start with your training delivery and your training offering. And that is essentially that your feedback and where you showcase and sell what it is, how you support best. So lots of stuff there, right? That comes through. So then the question is, all right, so how do I become the right business partner? Well, again, this is basically by showcasing, what you can do, right? But in order to do that, it's more it's not enough just to create that strategy, but you also need to showcase that you're working on understanding what your business partners want. So in order to give an example for that, I'm going back to my time at Apple, where I helped setting up the in-store trainers throughout Europe, Middle East, Africa, and India. So just for your idea, right, in over 20 countries in Europe, we created a role where we would basically put trainers in a car. They would go to stores and they would train people in stores to sell Apple products more effectively. So where do we start? Well, simple. We start at European Apple senior management. So we went to our EMEA sales, or actually our EMEA president or senior director. And we would talk to him about, all right, we want to do this. We need a team for it. What can you give us, right? And then we would talk to the local regional directors, right? Also to make sure that this would actually come to pass. So first thing that people ask is, how much does it cost, right? Always a good question, right? Now, there's loads and loads of answers that you can basically provide for this. But what we did is we literally calculated what does it cost on an annual basis to have one of these trainers in the field in Europe. We basically mediated this cost and calculated it times 80, because that's how many people we initially thought that we would need, right? And this is the fun part. Then you go to the senior director, he says 40, you end up with 70 or so, right? So that's basically how that goes, right, in this case. But that's a necessary part of that process where you need to negotiate that particular number. And one of the ways that you do this is actually to calculate at least a return on investment, or at least a cost saving that you do by implementing a project like this, right? So we would do that, and then we would actually go to the local training teams in Apple that we had in every country, right? So we went to the Dutch team, the German team, French team, the Spanish team, etc., etc. And each of these regional teams we convinced to get these people in. Then we had to make sure that we worked with our partners, the retail partners. These are people who sell Apple products, right? So you would go to the CEOs of these retail chains like MediaMarkt and T Telecom and T-Mobile and Deutsche Telekom and O2 and you name them, right? We went to them and he said, we want to give you free training. Like, all right, where do we sign up? Yeah. So fairly easy, it seemed. Yeah. But for us, what was important is that we actually would deliver something that they would need. So we would help and work with them to identify skills that salespeople in stores would need in order for us to provide them with the support that we thought they would need, right? So you'd go to the stores and we would do a training needs analysis. Yeah, and typically that is where we go in, we talk to store owners and we talk to the salespeople and we say, what are skills that you need? What are the levels of each of these skills at this moment? And where do you see the biggest gap, right? And how do you best think that you can overcome that? That's essentially what a training needs analysis is. So we did that. And then we said, all right, we got a budget now. We know how many people we have. So now we actually need to create the program and we need to get the trainers on board. So that's what we started doing. So we basically went for an Apple trainer selection and we built a readiness program, right? So what we did is we built a framework, a job description that said when people are going into stores to train other people, what do they need to be able to do? So what you do there is you build a framework of skills, right? Skills that trainers need in order to successfully train salespeople in stores. And this skills framework is something that is really necessary because this way you can actually track what it is that people need to be trained on and how to prioritize it, but also how you track progress of this training. So we built that first. Then we said, all right, let's look then for in-store trainers. So we start to interview people, right? We start to check what it is they need. And from there, we gave them a training program that would prepare them to go actually into these stores. And me and my manager at that time, we built a training program for 3 days, right? That actually took all of these in-store trainers through that program, allowed them to be up to date and up to speed with everything that was needed. And we would basically refresh that program once every 6 months and once every year, right? That's how we kept all these trainers centrally, up to date on what was going on. So how do we do that? Well, basically then we train them up, we give them a car, we give them a bunch of tools, iPads, Macs, cables, accessories, all that stuff, and send them out to visit stores. They go there, they train people up, and every month we basically track results. How are these stores doing? What feedback do the store managers give? What feedback do they get from customers, right? And of course, how much do they sell? Does it go up? Does it go down, right? What other skills are we identifying as we are training these people in stores that we actually need to give them to make sure that they do a better job, right? So all that kind of stuff are the things that we started tracking, right? And with that, we had a very big repository of data where we could say, all right, now we have data that allows us to show how we sell. We can tailor the program to focus on things that store people need, right? And we can then report back to managers both in those countries, but also centrally at Apple to highlight what kind of impact these in-store trainers are actually having, right? So this is, I hope I'm not too wordy, but this is basically one of these examples of where you build a whole training team and where you go through each of the steps to highlight what it is that people need and how you identify that when you build a training team for yourself, right? And a structure like this is quite, well, you can basically copy and paste it on any type of training and any type of role, right? As long as you do, especially that capability framework really well and the training needs analysis, right? You need to look at what do you want people to do? And you need to look at what skills do people need in order to do that well. If you get those things right, you get a good training program, right? And then you need people to actually build something around that that works for that particular company. And then it's execute, measure, execute, measure, execute, measure, right? That's basically the cycle then that we go through. So who do we talk to? Well, when you think about who you then focus on, right, to work together with in companies, well, one very simple group and very obvious group is yourselves, right? You as HR professionals are probably one of the, if not the most focused group to work with in order to implement, a training program, but also to define a strategy. Because typically HR knows really well what the skills are in the company, which people move in most, but you guys also have all the data around how often do people leave, right? What are things that people have most difficulty with? If you collect data for exit interviews that many HR companies do, you will find like, well, what is actually the main reason why people leave our company? And can we build something around that to make sure that we keep people longer in our company, right? To reduce the amount of costs and to showcase that the ROI, the return on investment for building trainings and a training team is actually maintained, right? Then of course we have the marketing team, right? Marketing team can be a team to work with if you work or if you help them, but also the marketing team is somebody that you want in your trainings to showcase what the company itself is doing, right? It can be a training team that is focused more on logistics if your company is about this, right? Or if you see that logistics is a large part of your company's success. Business development, right? Or sales, yeah, is one of these topics and teams that is quite obvious usually for training. Finance is always a team to work with because they control the numbers and you need to get budget, right? So they are quite an obvious choice too. And also the central management team. Usually when you build a training team, costs are considerable, especially in the beginning. So you need to have the central management teams okay in order to build and grow what it is that you are doing, with the employees within the company that you're working at. Yeah.